Hello friends, welcome to my SQLite tutorial. In this tutorial, we will learn how to perform CRUD operations using C#. Now, this tutorial is aimed at a beginner who want to learn more about the SQLite database and how to read and write through that particular database using the C# language. So we will teach you how to do the CRUD operations, which is a short form for create, read, update, and delete. So by using these operations, you can move data in and out of the SQLite database. So the first section of the tutorial will be an introduction to the SQLite database. And we'll also learn what Ado.NET is and how it is used for reading and writing data. Then we will teach you how to configure the compiler or an IDE to program the SQLite database. So here we'll be using Visual Studio, but I will also teach you how to use the .NET SDK CLI or the command line tools. Both of these can be downloaded from the internet. It's free of charge. And for Visual Studio, we'll be using the Community Edition. We will teach you how to configure the IDE and how to download the required .NET namespaces using the NuGet package manager. Then we will learn how to create a database using C#, create a SQLite database using C#, and we'll connect with that. Then we will learn to create a table in the SQLite database and insert data into that particular database. Then we will learn how to read and update data, the R and U part of the CRUD operations. Then we'll also learn how to handle reading null values that are present in the SQLite database. And finally, we will learn how to delete the data from the SQLite database. Now, this is going to be a hands-on tutorial in which I will teach you how to do everything from scratch. So it is ideal for a beginner who want to learn about it. So the major software tools we require are, we require the Visual Studio Community Edition. That will be the main software that we'll be using. You can download it from the Microsoft website, or you can also use the .NET SDK command line tools. These are command line tools, so there won't be any IDE. So it will be actually lighter on the system. It will require less memory, and it is also cross-platform. So you can use it on Linux also. Another tool I want to show is the DB browser for SQLite. This is a separate software. It is an open source software which you can download from the internet. It is used for visualizing the database structure, and it can also create and edit the database values. So this is an software that we'll be requiring during our development. Now, all the source codes are available on the GitHub. So the link for that particular source code is in the description. Now we have a website. This is called as xanthium.enterprises. And we also have a blog or a textual description of the tutorial here. So the link to this particular tutorial is available in the description of the video. And all the source codes are available from here. Everything that I'm saying is also written here. So you can check it out, and you can also download the source code from here. They are hosted actually on the GitHub. So this is the GitHub repo of our source code. And the first folder will be the source codes. Second will be the Visual Studio solution, which you can download from the source code. And I will be also using a sample SQLite database. So I have also uploaded that particular database. This is the database. So you can download it everything from here. If you know, you can go here, and you can also download as a zip file from here. So this is our YouTube channel. We have different tutorials for using the .NET framework. If you are new to the .NET command line interface or the .NET CLI, you can check our video here. So I'll also put the link in the description. Here I'm going to give a brief description about the SQLite database. SQLite is a serverless database. So unlike MySQL, which requires a separate process for the server and the client, SQLite does not require a separate server. So it is very easy to install and maintain. Actually, you're not installing anything. So what we'll be doing is that we'll be downloading a library, SQLite library, from the NuGet package that we will integrate with our program, that is a C# program, and we'll use that particular library to create and maintain an SQLite database. So the database will be a single file. It will be available on our disk, and it will be a single file. You can move it from one system to another. There is no issue with that. It is also widely used by various other softwares like the Chrome for storing internal information regarding the URLs and other stuff that they want to store. Now both SQLite and SQLite 3 are essentially same. It's just that there is a small difference in the version number. So in this tutorial, we'll be using both SQLite and SQLite 3. You can consider they are both the same. Here I'm going to give a brief description about Ado.NET, which is a software framework designed by Microsoft for interacting with data sources like the MySQL database system or SQLite database system. So the main concepts behind the Ado.NET framework are connection, this one, command, and the data reader. The Ado.NET framework also have different other concepts like the data table, data adapter, etc. But here we only have to consider these three concepts because we'll be using these three concepts extensively. Most of the CRUD operation can be done by using connection class, command class, and data reader class. So by using this connection class, we can create a connection object that is used to provide a connection with a data source. For example, in our case, it should be the SQLite database. So there will be methods provided for opening and closing the connection with the database. For example, it will be something like connection.open, connection.close to communicate with the database in question. So since we are using SQLite, the connection class will be this one, SQLite connection. Now, if you are using a different database, it will be slightly different. It will be called MySQLite connection if you are using a MySQLite database. Next one is the command object. So a command is used to create a command object which represents an SQL statement. So it is used to execute certain things like a query to create a table or to get something like that. So you have to use that to execute commands. For example, if you want to create a table, you have to use this one. Or if you want to insert some data into the database, for example, SQLite database, you will have to use the command class. So here we are using SQLite. So this will be called as SQLite command. Next one is known as the data reader class. This is used to get information from the database. So when we use this thing, this will read the data from the database depending upon the SQL query that we will be using. So here we will call that as SQLite data reader because we are using a SQLite database. Now before starting, we have to install the SQLite library and namespaces and other classes that are needed for accessing the SQLite library. So we have to use the NuGet package manager to install the required libraries for that. So I will show you how to do that later when we are configuring the Visual Studio application. So there are two main SQLite Ado.NET data providers. First one is called as the system.data.SQLite. You can search this in the NuGet website and you will get this one. So this is the one we will be using. There is also another one which is called as the Microsoft.data.SQLite. This also has almost the same function as the other one. This one is the lighter version of the system.data.SQLite. So most of our work, we only actually require system.data.SQLite.core. But I will be using this one because it's much easier and it has a lot of other functionalities also. So when we are configuring our Visual Studio, we will install this NuGet package for system.data.SQLite, this one. You can use this one also, but I'll be using this one. This has support for entity framework and other stuff. Now we are going to be setting up our development environment. We'll be using the Microsoft Visual Studio. You can download the free community edition from the website. Now I have created a folder called as CRUD_SQLite. I will be storing all my source code and project files. So it is here. So now I have started the Visual Studio 2022 and I will create a new project. So we'll select C#. We'll be using a console application. I don't want to bring any forms or GUI into this one. We will do something, we'll create the console one. So I will give the location and I will call it, I'll use the .NET 8.0 LTS and press create. Now the ID has created a program.cs file that we can see from here. Now we are going to install the required NuGet packages. For that, you shall go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. So you click on that one. So here you can go to Browse and you can search for system.data.SQLite. So you can find the system.data.SQLite. Also system.data.SQLite.core is also there. I'm going to take this one. Click on this one and click this one. Then from here you press install and you can see that it is getting installed from here. Press apply. Now this is installed. You can go here. You can see it's installed in this one. Now we can use the system.data.SQLite classes and libraries for our program. Now go to program.cs. You can type using. Now you can create a simple namespace. We'll call it SQLite. Now I'll create a class. We'll call it SQLite CRUD Ops. Now the main function. Now our basic setup is complete. Now we are going to create a new database. So first thing we have to do is to create a connection string. So we'll use the string parameter, the string data type. So we'll call it string connection string. So that will be equal to, so we have to give the name of the connection string like data space source equal to the name of the database that we are going to create. I shall call it my SQLite DB. You can give a file extension if you want. So I'll give it .db. So this is the connection string. So we'll use this connection string to communicate with the database. So we don't have any database right now. So when we create a connection, the system will check whether there is any database of the name mysqlite db.db. If there is no database, it will create a new database of SQLite type. So we'll call a SQLite connection. We'll name it my SQLite connection. So we have to give the name of the connection string inside the this constructor. So we'll copy the connection string from here. So when you run this program, a new SQLite connection object is formed using the connection string, this one. So after this formation, we have to open the connection to the database. So we'll call this connection object and then we'll call the open method. So when you call this method, it will try to connect. If it is not there, it will create a new database with this particular name. So once the database opened, we are going to close it. So we don't want any floating resources and all the resources that we are using should be closed. So we will close the connection. So this is a very simple program that will create a MySQLite database using the C# language. So I'll run this program right now. Now it's finished. So I'll close this one. Now I'll go inside our directory structure. So you can use the open folder in file explorer option. So this is the directory that we have created. Now we have to find the database that we have created. So that will be inside the bin debug folder. So you have a lot of DLL files and the exe files. I'll group it by type. So this is our exe file and the database will be created inside the same folder near the exe file itself. So you can find the database file is here. This is the database file and it is 0 KB because we have just created it. We have not written anything into this one. So if we have changed the configuration to release, it will be the database will be created inside the release folder. So you should be aware of that one. Now we can also explicitly specify where we want to create this one by using a full path to the place where we have to create it. So I'll create it inside the root directory. So I'll go here. I want the database to be created inside this particular directory, h-/CRUD_SQLite. So it will be created right here. So we'll give the absolute path. We'll copy this path and we'll give it here. So you can use the @ option here to preserve the backslashes. So this will be created right here. So I'll run it once more. So you can find our database right here. So this is under h-CRUD_SQLite. So this is the database and we are not written anything, so 0 KB. Delete this one. Now you can also check the state of the connection using the state property of the SQLite connection. So you're opening it right here. So we will. So this is state property. So the state property will give you the state, whether the connection is open or closed. So you can give it something like console.title. So here we are opening the connection. So the state will be open, and here we are going to close the connection. So it will be closed. So we'll write one here. Then we'll run it once more. So when we open the connection here, the state is open. That is the one that you are seeing here. And then we close the connection here. Then the state is closed. So you can use this particular property to check whether the connection is open or closed, and to create logic to do certain things if the connection is open, or check whether the connection is properly closed or not. Now you can also use something called as an using statement that is used to properly close the connection and terminate the resources that are used by the system. So we'll use the using statement here. This is the using statement. And then we will enclose it inside a bracket. Then we'll put it here. So we'll open the connection here. So the using statement ensures that all the connections that has been opened inside this one are properly closed. So we'll open the connection here. We don't have to explicitly close it, because by the time the control reaches here, the connection is automatically closed due to the use of using statement here. So this is the correct way to use it. You can also explicitly close or open it, but this is considered a better option. So we learned how to create a database using C#. Now whenever this particular code is called, it will either connect with a database if it exists on the disk, or it will create a new one. Sometimes we don't want to create a new one. We only want to connect with an existing one. If there is no existing database present in the disk, we want to say no database detected, and we have to throw an error. This is useful when we are connecting with an existing database that has some data. So if you are not able to find it, the software will create a new database which will not contain any data. So we have to avoid such situations. For that purpose, we will have to change the connection string in such a way that if the database is not available, it will just create an error. So for that purpose, we have to add another field or a key value pair. We shall call it fail if missing equal to. So this text string will prevent the MySQLite.connection from creating a new database if there is no other database with this particular name. So earlier we have created the database. So if I run this program, nothing will happen. Since the database is already present, it will connect with the existing database. Now I'll go inside the folder. So I'll go inside bin, debug, net 8.0, and then I will delete my database. Now there is no database present in the disk. So if I run this program, it will try to connect with this particular database. Since there is no database inside the disk, the whole thing will fail instead of creating a new database. So I'll run this thing, it will create an exception. So you can see there is an unhandled exception here, which says that it cannot open the database. So this is how you make sure that only the required database is open instead of creating a new one. You can actually enclose this thing inside a try catch exception handler like this one, try. So this is the proper way to handle this one. So if I run this, the exceptions will be handled and we will fail gracefully. So it's showing the message unable to open database file because there is no database file and it's not creating a new one. In this section, we will learn how to create a table inside an SQLite database using the C# language. So in the previous version, we learned how to create the database, but the database was empty. It does not contain any data or table. So here we will learn how to create a table into which we can add data. So the first thing is that we have to create an SQL query to create a table. So it will be something like create table if it not exists like that. Then we have to create a connection object using the SQLite connection class that we have done previously, and we'll use the same method. Then here we have to create something called as a command object, which is used for executing commands inside the SQLite database. So you have to use the SQLite command class for creating a command object. So the command object will have two parameters that it will take while creating the object. First one will be the SQL query we want to execute. The other will be the connection object. Now, after the connection object is created, we have to open a connection to the SQLite database. So after the connection is opened, we will execute the SQL query using the .execute non-query method. After that, we will close the connection. The execute non-query method is used because the SQL will not be returning any data because we are just creating a table. Now for our database, we will be creating the following table. The table is called as customers, and this is the basic structure of the customer. So we will have an ID, and we'll have a column for name, another column for storing the age, and another column for storing the date of birth. We'll also have a column for email and price. So the ID column, which is the first one, this one, is the primary key and uses the integer data type. The second one is the name. Here, Johnny Doe uses variable character or varchar and can store up to 255 characters. Now the age, which is the third column, we use the integer data type. For date of birth, we'll be using the text data type. And we will store the data in the form of a YYMMDD, that is a year, month, date format, which is the ISO 8601 format. So this is the format. So the year will be first, followed by two-digit month, and then followed by date. This is actually stored in the form of a text. Then we will use the varchar or the variable characters for storing the email. And the price we'll be using real because we want to store a floating point or decimal numbers. So this is the table we'll be creating inside the SQLite database. So we'll use a SQL query. This is the SQL query which we'll be using for generating the table. So we will use, this is the query part, and we will store the following information inside a string, this one. So I will just explain the SQL. It says create table. If not exist, this is the name of the table. Here it is customers. So the if not exist part, make sure that if the table already exists, it's not created again. Then we give the ID, which is of integer data type and is the primary key. Then we give the name, which is of variable character, age, integer data type, and so on and so on. And we are storing it inside a string. This @ is that I can format it in this particular format. So it's easy to understand. It's actually not required. Now, since we are using a database, I would recommend you use a simple tool called as the DB browser for SQLite. So it's a free program, open source program, by which you can see what's inside the database. You can also create the tables, column, and the database structure using this particular software. So it can be downloaded from this particular website, SQLitebrowser.org, and we'll be using this one to view what's inside our database. So it's available for multiple operating systems like Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So I have already downloaded this one. So if you don't want to use the SQL query, you can also create the database table customers using this visual tool, that is the SQL browser. But here I'll be using the SQL query because I want to make it. So this is the software. So now we are going to create a table. So the first part of the program, we can keep it just like this one. We are creating the connection. Then we'll create the SQL. So we'll call it string. We'll create table. So I'll name it as create table SQL query. And we'll just copy the data from my website. That is this one. So it's available here. So you can just copy it. Now we'll create a SQLite command object. So inside the connection, this one, we'll first open the connection. Then we will create a command object. So inside this one, we have to give two parameters. One is the SQL query we want to execute, and the other one is the connection. So we'll take our SQL query, that will be this one, and we'll paste it inside this one. Then we have to give the connection, that will be this one. Now we have to execute that particular command, that is this one, inside the database. So you call the command object, then you call the method execute non-query. So once this method is executed, this command will be executed inside the database, and a table will be created inside that database. So if you check our database, that is this one, you can see that the size is 0 KB because there is no data. So we'll execute this particular program and we'll create the table. So we'll run this program. So the execution is complete. So if you go to the database, you can see the file size of the file has changed. Now it's 8 KB. Now that's because the table is created inside this one. Okay, this is my SQLite connection. That is just the name I gave. It does not have any reference to the MySQL, this one. You can give it any name. I just use the MySQL one, so I don't want to confuse you. So I'll just change it to SQLite connection. These are user generated, this one and this one. So you can give it any name. So I'm just changing it to SQLite, so there is no confusion. Now we will use the DB browser for SQLite. So we can see inside the database what is happening. So you can go to File, Open Database. Then you go to the place where your database is located. So in this case, it will be inside the debug net 8.0. So you can paste it here. Open. So this is our web database. So you can click it, and now it will open. So you can see it's showing one table, this one, and its name is customer, and it has all these column names and the associated data types, etc. So this is the schema, and you can also see the data inside this one. We have not written any data, so if you go inside the browse data tab, it will not show anything. But you can see the column names here: ID, name, age, date of birth, email, and price. So here under database structure, you can see the structure of the database. All the data will be inside the browse data. So this one. Now that we have created the table, it's time to insert data into the table. Our table structure will be similar to this one. We have an ID, name, age, date of birth, email, and price column. Initially, this data will be 0 because we have not written anything into it. There won't be any data in this row. So our job is to insert the data into this particular row. So normally we will use an SQL query if you want to insert some information into the database. So the standard SQL query will look something like this one. Insert into customers. Here customers is the name of our table. If the name of your table is different, use a different name. Then we will call the table name. It's column name. That will be the name, this one, age, date of birth, email, and price. We won't be using ID because that's the primary key. We don't have to update that one. Then we will insert the values. So for name, we will be using Johnny Doe. Age will be 30. And the date of birth will be this one, followed by the email, and then price. Here the strings are using quotes. For example, Johnny Doe is in quotes. And the date is also in quotes because we are using that as a string. And for age, which is an integer number, we are not using a quote. Same here for the price also. This is how a normal SQL query will look like. Now, when we are updating the SQLite database using C#, we'll be using something called as parameterized SQL query. That will be this one. So it is similar to the previous one. We have the insert into customers or insert into that name of the table, and we will give the name of the column similar to this one here. But instead of directly giving the data here, we'll be using something called as a parameter. So we'll use @name parameter, @age parameter, @dob parameter, like that. So all the data that we have to add will be replaced by the parameters. So you can give any name. You can give it something like @a, b, or c. So it's much easier to give similar parameters that correspond to the name. So here I'll be using name parameter for the name, age parameter for the age, like that, dob for date of birth, and email parameters. Then we'll use a different function or a different method to add the corresponding name to this particular parameters. I will show that in the code later. So this is how you insert data into the table. So this is our earlier code for creating the table. So you can either keep this particular part here. You can run it, nothing will happen because there is an if not clause here. So it won't create another table. So you can also remove it. I will remove it because I want to concentrate on the insert part. So I'll just remove this one. Then we will create a new string. We'll call it as insert. So I'll just copy it from my website. This one. Don't want to. So this is the query. If you want, you can use @. So this will be the query we'll be running. So here we are using the create table query that you have to replace. So we'll delete it. We will put the insert data SQL query. Now we have to add the parameters here. So for that one, we have to use something called as command dot parameters dot add with value. So we have to give the parameter name and the value. Let's add this one. So first thing we will do is we will give the name parameter. So you can copy directly from here @name parameter. This has to be inside quotes, comma, followed by, you can give whatever name. I can give Let's say I'll give Johnny row itself. So now you can add the other one. That will be the age. So instead of name parameter, you give the age parameter. And no codes is required because we are going to give a number 30. Now we'll give the date of birth, which is a string. So you have to use the codes. So that will be something like 1984 -0509. So this is how we'll do it. I'll just copy it from my website. The names of the variables will be slightly different, okay, between the website and this one. So you should be careful regarding that one. All the data has now been appended to the command object. Now we'll call the command.execute non-query. So all this data will be written into the database. So it will return the number of rows that have changed. So you can say int. So you can display it if you want to. Now you can see from here, there is no data. You can use this button to refresh this. So there is no data right now. So I'll execute this program right now. So it's displaying 1, which means that one row has been changed. So we'll look into the closest one and we'll use the data browser, DB browser for SQLite to see what has happened inside the database. So you will just refresh it. And you can see that some data is there. So it's the same data we have entered. So we have inserted our first row into our database. If I run this program, it will insert the same value again and again. So I'll show you. You can change it here if you want to. See like this. Now, if you want to add different values, you have to change the values here. You can use it a loop or something to get data from the command line and insert it directly into the SQLite. This is how you insert information into the SQLite database. Now, for debugging purpose, you may want to know what parameters are being passed into the SQLite database. For that, you can use the command dot parameters, name of the parameter which you want to see. So here it will be @name parameter and its value. So dot value. This will show you the value of the parameter that is being passed into the database. So here command is the name of your SQLite command object, this one. So that is used to get the parameters. These are the parameters and you have to give the name of the parameters that you want to know. And dot value is to get the value. So you can use this command to find out all the parameters that we are passing to the database. So I'm going to know the value of the age parameter, the date of the birth parameter here, email, and the price. So if I run this program, it will show you the parameters being passed into the system. So I'll run this one. So that will be Johnny Dove 30 1984 0509. Like that, all the data will be shown. This is good for debugging the program if you are in trouble somehow. So these values are being passed into the database. So if I change it here, let's call him Steve. So if I run this, that will change. It will also be updated into the database. So you'll know which parameters are being passed. This is good for debugging purpose. This method helps you to list the parameters with their name. So you don't have to list the whole thing. Now in the previous examples, we have learned how to add data into the SQLite database. We have learned how to debug the parameters that are being passed into the SQLite database. In this section, we will learn how to read data from the SQLite database. So for reading data from SQLite database, we require something known as an SQLiteDataReader class. So this is the class we'll be using to get the information from the SQLite database. So we need a SQLite database which contains some data so we can read it from there. So this is our GitHub. This contains all the source code for our C# tutorial. Now here we have something called as a sample database. So you can download it. It contains a sample data of the same type that we have already shown to you. So you can use it to get information from this one. So you can just download it. So it's called MySQLite database.db. Go here and download a zip. So you can copy it from here. So this is the new one. So let's copy the entire name. I have placed it inside that bin debug net 8.0. So we can go here. We can change the data source to this one. So we'll be talking to this one. Don't need this one because we are going to read it from there. We will open that particular database using the SQL browser. So the database we have downloaded is MySQLite database.db. The other one we have created first. We don't need that one because we are going to read from this one. So it's similar to the same one, same tables, but the data is slightly different. It has more data, so you can use it for your reading purpose. You should also see that there are null values. There are null values inside this one. So we'll also teach you how to read these null values. So we'll be using the previous program for reading data from the database. So we'll create a small string, SQL query, select all. So this will contain our query, which will be select star, it means all, from customers. This is the table name. So this query will be executed by our program, and we will read data from this one, MySQLite database.db. So this is different from the previous database because it already has some data. So this is the data. So when you run this query, all the information will be taken out and displayed on the console. So you can actually run the SQL from here using this one. So if you run this thing, so you can actually check it from here. You can run the query. So you can go here and run. So it will show all this information. So all this information will be read from the database by our C# program. Here we are reading it inside the DB browser. So you can use this DB browser for checking out your SQL commands. So this is the data we'll be running. And everything is similar to the previous one. We will be using the SQLite connection to create a new connection. Then we will open that SQL connection to this particular database. So that you should remember, we are using this one. And then we will create a command object, this one, using this query. So we have to give it here. Okay, so we have that query, which is the select all query, and the connection on the command object. Now you can use the SQLite reader. Now we'll use the we call the SQLite data reader. And we'll call it my reader equal to. Now we have to use command. This is a command object we are using here. Dot execute reader. So usually we'll create an SQLite data reader, my reader, then we will use a new command. Here we are not using that one. We are creating the my reader here. Then we are calling the command object, a method of the command object called command.execute reader. This will read the database tables and will pass that information into the myReader using a data reader object. So then we can use the functions of the myReader to read that information row by row and display it on our console. So we'll use a while loop here. So it will be myReader dot read. So this method will read row by row after every. So once a row is taken in, we have to get the individual columns. So we are using select star from customers. That means that we have to read all the columns. So for that purpose, we have to declare. We should know what column represent what. So the first one will be an int. So we'll call it int id equal to dot get. So we know it's int because we are going to read the first one. That will be the id or the primary key. So we'll take it as int32, and we have to specify the column name. So the first column is id, so we have to give it 0. It's kind of like the array notation. So here we'll be reading the id. So you can check here. This is the first column, so it's the id. So next one will be the name. So we have to use a string. So we'll call it as a string name equal to same thing myReader. MyReader has a lot of methods, so you can check for string. So we have to give the column number, so that will be 1. So this will read the name. So id 0, 1. Then we have to read the age. So age also will be int. So you can use this one. We have to change it to 2. The reason we have to read all this thing is we are using the select all. So all the columns will be read from the database. So date of birth will be string. So I'll be using string. Next one is email. So you can use the same string. Other one will be, we have to use double here. So this is string email. So it will be for email. Now we'll be using double here for price. So you can use the get double one. And you'll use the 5th column. So this will display the price. Now you can display it using the console.writeLine function. So I'm going to, now we'll run the program. Now as you can see, the program has read the values from the SQLite database. So you can see the first one is 1. So you can see the first one is Johnny Austin Dave. This one, age 68, 1989, 0401. So all the data has been read correctly, but after 6th, we have a null value. So they have reached the null value and we were not able to handle that null value particularly good. So the system created an unhandled exception. So I'll teach you how to handle null value later. Right now we will do just this one. So when you are reading a null value, we have to do a check whether the red value is null or not. Otherwise we will get an exception like this. So this is how you read the data. I will teach you how to remove that exception later. But you can see that the first one is Johnny Austin, second one is Jane Smith, similar to our query here. Now I'll use a different query also. Now in the previous example, we were using select star from customers. That means that all the data will be shown to the program. Now we are going to make it far more selective. So I'm going to use something like select name, age from customers, and I'm going to limit it to 6 numbers. So when you run this program, you will get something like this. There will be 6 names and corresponding ages for that one. So we have to make the changes. You have to copy it here. This is the SQL query we'll be executing. So you'll copy it from here and you can put it here. That's all. Everything else is same. So when you're reading this data, there is a small difference. So as you can see from here, The first column is name. So when you are using this one, it should be string name equal to myReader.getString. This should be 0 because we are going to call the first column, so it will be 0. In the earlier example, the first column was ID because we are calling all the data. So the second column should be age. So that you have to provide it as 1. So this is the second column. So this will be 1. So like that you have to read it. And I'm purposely using limit 6 because I want to avoid those columns which has a null variable. So if you have a column that has a null variable, we need to do a null check. So I'll teach you that later. So I'm going to run this code. So here is all the data. We didn't have any exceptions because we were avoiding the null part. Now we have successfully read data from the database. Now we were using this get in32 followed by the index for the first column. Then we were using get string method and then get float method to get the respective data. Now as you can see from there, we have to know the correct index 0, 1, 2 like that. So we'll have to look into our database table. Then you have to manually check this is the 0, 1 like that. So there is another way to read the data where we'll be reading the data directly by using the column name. So for reading the column, so let's say we want to read the column ID, we just call it myReader column name like that. So that is another way to read the data. So we'll change this code to make. So we'll just add a bracket, square brackets. Then we will give the name of the column. So it will be ID here. So ID is actually int. So this will be returning a text. So we have to use a convert to. So we will be using convert to int32. So in this way, we can read the data directly by specifying the column name, something like this ID. So if I run this one, there are no errors. I'll change the whole thing. So for string, you have to, so we have to give the name here, give the name. Then we have to use the string method to convert it. So here I had to change it to age. This is the name of the column that we are putting there inside the square bracket. So this is an int, so we have to convert it to int32. So these are strings, so you don't have to. So you have to find the name of the date of birth. So this is the name of our column, string. So convert to string. So you'll use the to double option here. So there is no dot in between the myReader and the square bracket. So we have to change it here also. So we are using double. So we will run this code right now. So now the whole system is working right now. So we have only limited the number of entries to 6 because there are some null values inside the records after 7. So we will do a separate program to read those null values and to get it correct. In this section, we will learn how to read null values from an SQLite database using the SQLite DataReader class. In the previous examples, we have learned how to read the data from SQLite database using the SQLite DataReader class. You can see from the below screenshot, we were able to read all the data except when we reached a place where we encountered a null value. So as a result of encountering a null value, we experience an exception that is shown here. Now here we will learn how to stop that particular exception and to read the null value properly. Now we have to learn the basic difference between a null and a DB null. Null is a literal from the C# language, which is used to indicate the absence of values, while DB null is a class provided by the .NET framework, which is used explicitly to indicate that the value in a database is a null value. So you cannot directly compare both null and DB null. So to compare both of them, we have to use the value property of DB null. So we have to use if the return value is equal to DB null dot value. Then only we can check whether the null values returned by the database reader, that is the SQLite data reader, is a null or not. So here we will do that. Now I have opened my database, my SQLite database.db on the DB browser. As you can see that the ID equal to 7, that is Sarah Black, has an age equal to null. So we'll be reading this particular value using our C# program. So I'll teach you how to handle this null value while you are reading the data using the SQLite data reader. Now I have crafted this particular SQL query, select age from customers for ID equal to 7. So that corresponds to Sarah Black, age equal to null. So I will run this particular one. We will read using myReader.read. Then we'll read that data, convert that into int32 and display it on the line. So I'll be reading a null value and this will result in an exception. I'll show you. So this is an exception because there is an issue with comparing DB null with the other null. If it was a normal null, this won't be an issue. So we need a way to check whether the value that we are reading is null or DB null. So you can use a simple if loop. Now you have to compare it with not with DB null, but the value DB null dot value. This is the property to which we have to compare. So if it is true, we will just print out a -1, indicating that it's a null value. So you can put it here, or you can just write null value. Now, if my reader age is not a DB null value, we can directly convert it using the int32. So you can write, if the value read is not a DB null dot value, we will read the value, this one, then we'll convert to int, then we'll display it on the command line. So we'll run this one right now. So it's printing null value. So I'll go inside the DB browser. So we'll change null to something else. So now it will read 12. So we had to save this value first. Now we'll read it again. Now it's showing 12. So this is how you read a null value and check whether the value read is null or it is not. Now this looks a little bit verbose. You can also shorten it using a ternary operator. Here we are using a ternary operator. So we will first check the condition. This one, that is before the question mark, my reader age equal to DB null dot value. If it is true, a -1 will be returned and it will be stored in the age. If it is not a null value, it will be converted to an int32. So we have to use my reader here. Then the age will be converted to int32, and in our case it will be 12. So 12 will be stored in the int age equal to 12. So you can now print age equal to 12 using console.writeLine. So this makes it much easier visually, so you can easily understand what is happening here instead of that complicated if loop. Now I'll change it once more. I'm going to print everything in the command line. So I have already done that right here. Now here I have changed the query. We select star from customers. So we'll get all the data from the customers and then we will print it on our console. So here I am using the column name to get the name here. Then I will check whether this is equal to db null value. If it is true, that is, if it is a null value, it will just return a null string, that is a string called null to this particular variable. If it is not, it will return the name. Same here also. Here we'll be reading the age. If it is equal to db null.value, it will return -1. If the value is not null, it will read the read the value from the myReader age column. Then it will convert into int32, and that int32 will be stored in this particular value. Then like that, all the values will be read and it will be displayed on the console. So I'll run this code. So you can see all the data here, and I will also show the database, that is this one. So I'll go from bottom up. We have Steve. Steve has no name. Steve has no age here. So that's a null value. So I will be represented by -1 here. He also has no date of birth. So null value, because it's a string, we are writing null. So like that, the 9th element does not have a name. So it's null. So is 8th. So that's also null. Since these are strings, we are just writing null here. If it is an age, that is an int32 variable, it's -1 like that. So this is how you read a null value from a database, an SQLite database. Here we will learn how to update a value in an SQLite database. So first, this program will display the value or the name and age of the person inside the record that is identified by the ID equal to 3. So in this case, here it is Krishnadas Rajagopal. Then it will prompt you to update it. So you can give the name and age, which it will then write into the database. Then it will display the updated values by reading it from the SQLite database. So this is how you update values in an SQLite database. Now I'll explain the code. Here we will update the name and age column of the record, which is identified by the ID 3. So here the name is Krishnadas Rajagopal and the age is 47. So we will use our C# program to update his name. So we'll change it to another name using our program. So the important thing is that we have to remember the ID. So we'll be using this ID to update these two values. So first we have to create a SQL query. Now this is the code for the update program. So the first section of the update section will get the data from the database and display it. It will show the first name, the original name, and then we will enter the name and age which we want to change. Then that changes will be returned into the SQLite database. So the first part of our program will read the data. So it is similar to the old one where we are creating a connection. We are opening the connection here. We'll create an SQLite command called query command, which is used to run this query. And then we'll get all those data using the DataReader class. Then the information will be printed on the console. Then we will ask for the data to be updated. So here we will use the console.writeLine to enter the name to be updated. Then we will read that data into name to be updated. That's a string to which we have to update the name. Now we will read the age from the command line using console.readLine function. Since the readLine returns a string, we have to convert that into int32, and that will be storing age to be updated. Now we'll create a new query which is called as update customers, set name equal to @name, age equal to @age, where ID equal to @ID. Now we'll have to give the ID equal to 3 so that it will update the record at 3. So we'll create the SQLite command. So it will be update command. Then we will use the update command.parameters to add the value name, which is the name to be updated, which we have taken from the console. Same here, age to be updated, that is an int value. We have taken that from the console also. So that will go here. And for ID, we give it 3. So it will update the third row. Then we execute the command. Once the command is executed, we reread the database and display the changes to the console. So I'll run the code now. So we have our ID, which is 3, followed by our name and its age. Now we can give a name to be updated. So I can give it Rohit. So this is the name we'll be giving, and we will give it as 34, age. So it's saying that the data is updated for ID equal to 3. The new name is Rohit Raju, and the age is 34. Now you can go into the DB browser and you can refresh it. Here we can see it's Krishna Gopal 47. Now we have changed it. So if we refresh it, it will change. So for 3, it is Rohit Raju, age 34. So this is how we update the data inside a SQLite database. If you give ID equal to 4, it will actually update this one. So like that, you can change it. You can also use different SQL queries to suit your needs. Now we have reached the final leg of our tutorial. Here we will learn how to delete a record in the SQLite database. A record is also known as a row, so we will be deleting a whole row. So here we can see the ID equal to 4, which is Bob Brown, age 29, bobbrown@example.com. This is the record we will be deleting completely from our database. So most of the work is actually done by the SQL query. So we have the code here. So this is our code, and we are deleting data from our MySQLite database.db. Now the string we will be using this one. This is the SQL query which we have to execute. We are calling it delete from customers where ID equal to @ID. So whatever ID we are giving it here, it will execute. It will remove the whole row from the database. So we are just using the old commands only. Using the SQLite command, we are creating a new command object, and we will be running this query. So we have to find the name of the ID. So here the ID for Bob Brown is 4. This is the ID column, and this is 4. So we can give that value 4. Now we'll execute this one. Now the row will be dropped from the database. The code has finished execution. So we'll come here. We will refresh the database. So you can see the 4th ID is no longer available here. It is deleted. Now if you give it another number, like let's say 3, which is equal to Rohit Raju. So that will go also. Just put 3 here. So it's gone. So if I refresh this one, 3 will be gone. So now 3 is not there. Only 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 10 are there. This is the ID actually. This is just the line numbers. So should know that difference. So this is how we delete data from the SQLite database. Now you can also delete the table itself. You just have to give the write SQL command. Now I think you're familiar with basic SQLite functions and how to use them using the C# language. So if you like our tutorial, do like us and subscribe to our channel if you like our content. And thank you for listening to my tutorial.